All right, Coach Justin here with the Kai Calling Fitness team. Welcome. I'm going to talk today about some contrasts of the effects that I've observed from nicotine versus caffeine use. Spoiler alert: I don't really use nicotine much personally because I don't react well to it, and so my experience personally is different from yours. But I'm well aware of the effects in most of the population and how it used to work for me back when I could tolerate it. So both are stimulants. Both have a stimulating effect. Both seem to influence the brain to sort of like be more wakeful, be more alert, and that sort of thing. Both can increase blood pressure. Both can lead to a higher state of arousal, if you will, and alertness and that kind of thing. Both can be sort of focusing. But there are some subtle differences from what I have personally seen in my experience and that of other people that I've worked with and talked to about it. So, caffeine often has more of a simple effect of just stimulation. It tends to wake you up. It tends to like get you going. This can be somewhat problematic with nicotine's effect on some of the sleep hormones if you use it in the morning. So my suggestion is if you use caffeine, wait until you've been awake for a couple hours before using it. That limitation doesn't seem to exist from nicotine from my research, although I could be wrong. So someone correct me. I'm sure someone will in the comments if I'm incorrect there. But it doesn't seem to you don't seem to have that crash. Now, part of this is because of just caffeine and nicotine being what they are, but nicotine doesn't seem to have that interaction with the nervous system and blocking some of those leftover sleep hormones that are still in your blood when you wake up. So, yes, it will wake you up, but you still have to sort of deal with those hormones later on in the day. And so that's why you can tend to get a crash and you keep like upping your caffeine and then you crash the up caffeine and you crash and it sort of can become this loop. I have not observed that to be the case with nicotine. I have not talked to anyone who's particularly experienced it. Now, I think in part this is because it seems like, in general, you don't really get the half life is actually not that dissimilar between the two. However, it seems like caffeine, when you get down below a certain dose, it is no longer effective or active. There's also a concept of a an actual effective dose. And so caffeine seems to have this threshold where once it drops below a certain point, it's like you're done and it's gone and you lose the effect. It does have more of an interaction with the adrenal glands. And so perhaps this is more to play, whereas nicotine works more on the serotonin dopamine side of neurology. And so nicotine's effect is more to give you a boost that generally is more of a slow, gentle decay. And when it's gone, you almost forget that it was there. It's just kind of like next thing you know, it was gone and it had its effect, usually doing its thing for about 3 to 4 hours, although it does remain in your system for much longer, not just for detection purposes, but you're looking at a several hour actual effect generally. This is, of course, dose dependent. Um, both of these substances are addictive. I can tell you that in my use of them, coming off of caffeine cold turkey, having abused it very strongly in my 20s, was way worse, at least in my experience. I got headaches, I had withdrawal symptoms, just didn't feel well, felt just kind of like trash. Nicotine, that hasn't been my experience, but I have never used it to the degree that I use caffeine either. And both can be difficult to come off of if you form a dependency. So, what I would say is if you use either one of these, take breaks. Just like with almost any substance, it shouldn't necessarily be used all the time every day. It can be used in a manner that's, in my opinion, responsible by making sure you take breaks. Pick a day of the week that you don't use it. Don't use the nicotine on Saturday or Sunday or Monday. Just pick a day, skip a day, make sure you still feel okay that day, and that's probably an indicator that you're able to continue sort of like doing things as you've been doing them. Now, what I would say in my own personal experience with caffeine, and this is mirrored by a lot of other people I've talked to, once you get to a certain age, you can often get heart palpitations and some other funny like fluttering feelings and stuff like that. It can be very uncomfortable. This is what I deal with caffeine, and that's why I very rarely use it. If I use it in moderation very occasionally, this seems to be fine. But if I use it with any kind of regularity, I get the palpitations and things like that. It's not necessarily life-threatening, but it's very uncomfortable and definitely takes away from any benefits that I would derive from it. So what I would say with the caffeine is if it works well for you, then use it. And similarly with nicotine, if it works well for you, then you could use it. If you react poorly to it and you get those heart palpitations, like some people actually do, it just seems more rare, then don't use it. Not everything is a good fit for everybody. So The way that I think nicotine can be appropriately used is it's actually more okay to use it first thing in the morning. You're not going to get this stimulating effect that's just going to like raise you up like caffeine does, where you almost feel jittery and you want to like go crazy. It's more of a subtle, like focusing and drive type of energy. It's definitely more subtle. You can kind of get a buzz from it, but it's not going to give you that like fidgety energy that you can get from caffeine. Again, I think because it's not working on the adrenals so much, whereas caffeine is adrenals, and you get the just that you do get an adrenaline response, and that seems to actually like directly give you those jitters and things like that. Both are documented to be appetite suppressive. In my opinion, nicotine is stronger in this area than caffeine. I definitely noticed that when I'm using nicotine, I get a little less hungry for meals, and also I get full much faster. I'm kind of just less interested in food in general. This is sort of a cool pro tip, and bodybuilders have been doing this forever on preps when they're losing weight, dieting down to really low body fat levels, because your body will increase hunger signaling as you get leaner, particularly when you get down to those like single digit body fat numbers. Nicotine will suppress that hunger sensation to some degree. Now, you're still going to be hungry if you're that skinny, but it will actually help you with diet compliance in many cases and can be worth considering. Now, if you are someone who struggles with insulin sensitivity, please note that nicotine may actually reduce your insulin sensitivity. This could potentially be harmful to your health. It's very subtle, but it is a fact that you should be aware of. If you have insulin sensitivity issues and it's managed properly, just monitor and make sure that it's not doing anything goofy. Make sure that your fasted blood glucose levels are staying below 100. And fasted generally would be recognized as 2 hours after consuming a normal meal. But I do like it to get below 100 within an hour or so if it's a meal that was not fatty. So if it was a low fat meal that was just carbs and proteins with very little fat in general, and then I'd like to see it settle within about an hour typically. Although sometimes digestion's slow and it's not just the insulin response that could be keeping you above that level. So there's nuance to how we want to consider working through something like that. However, if your insulin sensitivity is generally good and you don't seem to have any problems with that, what I would say is consider using nicotine if you're trying to diet and lose weight. It may actually help you suppress appetite marginally, and it may be useful. Both of these, I would say, be cautious of consuming in the evenings. I think that nicotine is a little bit more forgiving as it pertains to sleep disruption, but I would usually say, like nicotine, don't use more than 3 or 4 hours before going to sleep, and don't use caffeine, basically any time after like 2 p.m. if you follow a normal sleep schedule, maybe 3 p.m. Just switch to decaf or something, which is what I drink because I like the flavor. There seems to be health benefits to coffee in general. So hopefully that's useful. I'm going to come back and do some more videos on some of the ways that I like to use nicotine specifically and the different delivery mechanisms. Pouches can work well, but gum can also. And so also, the dosage becomes relevant. The route of administration between those two becomes relevant. But those are my favorite two. And I think they both have different places for different people based on what they want to do and what their goals are. So thanks for watching, guys, and sticking with it. Justin Johnson, High Calling Fitness. Come talk to the team. We'd love to help you. HighCallingFitness.com. Book a meeting with one of the coaches, and we'll get you hooked up.